First thing, what are hedge funds? The one thing a hedge fund does not do is hedge. That's the one thing they don't do.
That's right.
Hedge funds are expressly set up to avoid the Investment Company Act of 1940. They are distributed as private placements under Reg D. So what does that mean? That means if you're not an accredited investor, no hedge fund for you. That definition of accredited investor is very testable. 1, 2, $3 million net worth, 200,000 in income, 300,000 married and finally jointly. I don't know of any hedge fund that would organize itself or distribute its interest in its partnership as a 506B, because I can't imagine they want 35 non-sophisticated people in there. They have an unlimited number of institutional customers, and they're set up as partnerships. So the hedge fund manager, general partner, the limited partners provide the money, the GP provides the experience. They have very high fees, 2 and 20. The guy who first set up the first hedge fund thought, well, you know what? I'm kind of like a clipper captain from the 19th century. And in the 19th century, clipper captains got 2% of the cargo value and 20% to land the ship and sell the cargo, the profits. And so he said, I'm going to get 2 and 20. And that is the typical compensation for a hedge fund. There's some that's more. Stevie Cohen, who owns the New York Mets, has a hedge fund called Point 72, Brian. His is 3 and 30. 3% of the assets under management, 30% of the profits. Last point. I told you they're not hedge funds. So that we lose a lot of portfolio managers. Like one of the legendary portfolio managers at Fidelity was a guy named Jeffrey Vinnick. And, Fidelity Management Research, the investment advisory firm to the Fidelity funds, came to Jeffrey and said, listen, you can't do that. There's this thing called the Investment Company Act of 1940. One day he quit. He said, if you love me with all the constraints of Fidelity and the Investment Company Act of 1940, you're going to love me now without that. I'm setting a hedge fund. Minimum investment, $50 million with a lockup. Test question. Since they're partnerships, they have a lack of liquidity.
There
You can't get in or out of the hedge fund without the permission of the general partner, the hedge fund manager. So I think that's a nice overview. I don't know if that rates a separate lecture. I mean, I could make one. What do you think, Brian? Does that cover it? Anything you would add?
That covers it. I was going to mention the liquidity or illiquidity, but you brought that in on the end. One question maybe on the 7 might show up on the 65 and or 66 as one question, but it's all that was it. That's everything you need to know.
Brian, I get a little perturbed sometimes, because I was a placement agent for hedge funds, venture capital funds, and private equity funds. I was a practitioner. So I get really upset when people in our space pretend to know what they're talking about on these alternative investments when they really don't.